Hello, my sewing friends. Today I'm going to show you how to make a very easy corset top with ribbon straps. I've listed the materials that you'll need to complete this project in the description, so check that out before you get started, and let's go! First of all, we're going to create the pattern, and we're going to do this in a somewhat unconventional manner by draping some kind of material over your body. I use toilet paper, but I personally wouldn't recommend that unless that's all you have because it is extremely flimsy. You may want to try this with pattern paper or a non-stretchy material like an old bed sheet or an old shower curtain. Make sure it's not stretchy though. You are going to need someone to help you with this. Do not attempt to do it on your own because you will get frustrated and it will be a failure. To start off, you're going to tie some kind of string around your waist. I used shoelace because that's what I have on hand. You are going to tie it around the smallest part of your torso, which as you can see on me is a little lower in the front than it is in the back, but on you it might be different. Next, I like to create some guidelines on my body so that I know where to drape the toilet paper or whatever other material you might be using. You wouldn't have to do this, but I personally find it helpful. So I like to use bandage tape. You can get it cheaply from the drugstore, and I'm making a straight line down the front of my body all the way to the shoelace at my waist. And I do another one at the back, same thing, from my back neck in a straight line all the way down to the shoelace at my waist. Now I'm going to create the shape for the neckline of the corset top from that center front guideline all the way around to the center back guideline. Keep in mind that the back is usually quite a bit lower than the front. Now it's toilet paper draping time. So you're going to want the person helping you to drape pieces of toilet paper or whatever other material vertically on you, starting at the center front line that you've taped and working your way around to the back. You can probably drape the front by yourself. I did that if you're using a mirror, but you cannot drape the back by yourself. I tried, but it ended up failing, and I had to wait for my boyfriend to get home to help me with a bunch of toilet paper taped to my skin. Alright, so you want to make sure the toilet paper is flat, flat, flat. So when you inevitably have areas where the toilet paper or whatever other material is sticking up like this, fold it down and tape it so that it stays flat. Flatness is the name of the game here. Very important because you want it to contour perfectly to your body. So now that half your body is toilet papered or shower curtained up, we're going to draw some lines. Start by drawing what's called a princess seam. So that's a line that goes through your bust point, otherwise known as your nipple, which is the fullest part of the bust. So start up here a little bit to the side of where your bust point is, draw a line through your bust point, and continue that straight line down to your waist. You can kind of decide what angle you want this line to have, as long as it goes through the bust point. Actually, I don't like where I drew mine, so I'm gonna draw it again. Oh, and I forgot about this while I was filming, but you're going to want to draw a straight horizontal line through your bust point or like close to it to act as a notch so that you know where to line the two princess seams up after you've cut them out. So let's just pretend that all of this is still attached together and draw a horizontal line at the bust point on either side of your princess line. Next, we're going to make the side seam. So draw a line from the top bandage tape area down to the shoelace at your waist, right in the middle of your side body. As you can see, it's kind of hard to do this on yourself. You may want to ask somebody to help you. Okay, now we're going to cut out those lines that we've drawn. So first, cut out your princess seam, and you can see here why toilet paper is not the greatest material because it's kind of flimsy. Next, cut out your side seam. And finally, carefully peel off the front and back pieces. Again, you are going to want to get someone to help you peel off your back piece. Alright, so now you're going to grab some paper, ideally tracing paper because it's transparent. You know what, heck, you could use parchment paper. That's like basically the same thing as tracing paper. You're going to put your little toilet paper pattern pieces on the paper, put something to weigh them down, and trace them out. Keep in mind that the pieces at the front and the back that were along those tape guidelines are supposed to be straight lines. So if yours is a little wonky when you peeled it off, just use a ruler to trace and make it a straight line. Also, don't trace the pieces right next to each other. Leave some space in between them. We're going to be adding an inch wide border all the way around. That's called seam allowance, so don't trace them too close to each other. And remember that notch at the bust point you drew earlier? Make sure to transfer that to both your center front piece and your side front piece. Okay, so we've got our 3 pattern pieces laid out, and now we're going to want to label them. The long piece with the straight line that went through the center of your bust is going to be called the front piece, or center front piece if you prefer. Label that straight line at the front, center front, and then the longer, slightly curved line on the other side is the princess seam, and the bottom is the hem. Do that for the other pattern pieces as well. This rounded one is going to be called side front. Label the very curvy line princess seam, and then the straight diagonal line on the other side is side seam, and then again the bottom is the hem. For the back piece, you can call it the back. That short straight line is center back. The piece opposite, or the line opposite, sorry, that's a diagonal line, is the side seam, and again the bottom is the hem. Next, this part is really boring, but you really should do it. It's called walking the pattern. This is where you make sure that the seams that are going to be sewn together, in this case the side seams, are the same length. So you flip one pattern over upside down, and this is why it's good if you use transparent paper, and you line up the top point of the side seam of the back pattern with the side seam of the side front, and you walk the pattern all the way down, pivoting with a pencil as you go until you get to the bottom to make sure that they're the same length. You could also just measure each one with a tape measure. Or you could be rebellious and just not walk the pattern at all. I would not recommend doing that, but you do you. That said, we will not be walking the pattern at the princess seam because the center front princess seam is actually a little bit longer than the side front. That's just how it is. I'll show you how to deal with that when we get to the sewing. So now we're going to add seam allowance. I would recommend having a large seam allowance just because this is a bit of an unorthodox pattern making method, and having a larger seam allowance gives you some flexibility in case it doesn't fit perfectly. I'd recommend 5/8 of an inch at minimum, or even 1 whole inch, and in this case I just added 1 whole inch all the way around all my pattern pieces. Finally, the last thing we're going to do is add the grain line. I'll explain why this is important in a second, but basically what you want to do for the center front pattern, just draw a line parallel to that center front line. Then you want to draw 2 little arrows pointing towards the center front line and write cut on fold. For center back, again, you draw a parallel line to that center back line, but this time you draw an arrow pointing up and then another one pointing down at the bottom, and you write cut to instead of cut on fold. Finally, for the side front pattern, we're just going to guesstimate where the grain line should be. So draw a straight line approximately in the middle of the pattern and write cut to. Okay, now we're going to cut these puppies out. This is where the grain line we just drew is important. You want to cut the fabric on its natural straight grain line so that it doesn't turn out all wonky and weird. See these lines going up and down the fabric? That's the grain line, otherwise known as the straight of grain. It is parallel to the selvage, which is this edge of the fabric here. So lay down your pattern piece and measure from the grain line to the selvage, and make sure that it's the same distance from the selvage at the top and the bottom. You're going to cut 2 of the back piece and 2 of the side front. However, you're going to only cut 1 of the center front piece, but you're going to cut it on fold, which means you're either going to literally cut it on a fold of the fabric, which I would not necessarily recommend. I would recommend that you lay it out against the grain line of the fabric. I draw a straight line in the middle with a ruler first, trace half, then flip it over that line you drew and trace the other half. So you may have noticed I don't trace my sewing lines when I cut out my fabric, and that's just because I've been sewing for a while, so I don't actually need them. However, if you are a beginner, you may want to use chalk paper and a tracing wheel to trace around the outside, and then also trace your sewing lines so you know where to sew. I've linked a video about how to do that in the description. Alright, so the pattern pieces are cut out and we are ready to sew them together. This is pretty straightforward. You match up the side seams together, so the side seam of the back piece with the side seam of the side front piece, for instance. Good sides together, so you want the side that you want the world to see. You want that side to be together when you sew. Same thing, princess seams together. Like I said earlier though, princess seams are a little bit finicky, so I would recommend sewing those by hand at first, because there is going to be some rippling, because like I said, that center front piece is actually longer than the side front. In fact, you may want to just sew everything by hand at first, just for the test fit. Alright, so now I've sewed everything together and I'm trying it on to test the fit. You can either get someone to pin up the back to close it for the fitting, or you can insert a zipper like I did. Just make sure that you're respecting that 1-inch seam allowance that we inserted, right? So make sure if somebody is pinning it for you that they are pinning it 1 inch away from the raw edge on either side. So mine fits pretty well. If you're having fit issues, like it's too loose or too tight, try to make those adjustments at the side seam. It doesn't need to fit perfectly, obviously, but if you do want to improve the fit, I've linked a video on that below. Alright, so now that the fitting is done, I'm going to insert a zipper. So remember how we have 1 inch of seam allowance at the top and the bottom, right? So the placement of the zipper stops should be about 1 inch down from the raw edge at the top, and similarly the zipper box at the bottom should be about 1 inch up from the raw edge of the hem. Quick note, you're going to want to use a separating zipper for this. If you were to use a closed zipper, then you wouldn't be able to get it over your chest or over your butt, depending on how you're putting it on, and the whole thing would be pointless. So you have your sewing line marked in chalk or pencil or whatever material that's 1 inch away from the raw edge, right? So that's where you're going to line up your zipper teeth. So I've opened my zipper and I'm lining the teeth for the left side of the zipper along the sewing line, facing towards the left on the good side of the fabric. I've done the same thing on the right, lining up the zipper with the teeth along the sewing line and having the teeth pointing to the right on the good side of the fabric. And I've pinned it so it stays in place. It might seem counterintuitive to line them up on the good side with the teeth facing away from each other, but it's because you turn it over like this and then it looks really nice. Now I'm going to baste the zipper in to make it easier to sew by machine, and then I will sew it by machine using a zipper foot. Alright, next I'm going to press open the seams, mainly just so they look pretty. We are so close to being done, guys, I promise. Now I'm going to add the ribbons. In terms of the amount of ribbon you need, I'm a big fan of guesstimating. So I just line up the ribbon a few inches above my bust point, let it flow over my back until it's at about mid-back, measure to see how much that is, and then cut 4 ribbons that are that length. The first 2 ribbons are going to go on the front, so I am lining the ribbon up with the top of the princess seam on the good side of the fabric, and then I will sew that down close to the edge. I'll do the same thing on the other side. For the back, you can kind of put it wherever you want. I would say about 3.5 or 4 inches from the raw edge. And then same deal as the front. Okay, we are so close here. So frankly, I am tired of making this thing and just want it to be done, so I'm going to roll up the hem. It's 1 inch if you recall, fold it around the zipper like this, stitch it down about 1/2 inch from the bottom, and call it a day. And I will do the same thing at the top. And if you do want to do more sophisticated hems or seam finishes, which I completely understand, I have linked a video on that below. Yay, you are done! Enjoy your beautiful, relatively easy corset top. Go you! Okay, thanks for watching everyone, and I will see you in the next video.